学会忏悔，一代一切众生惭愧忏悔，所有任妄为真、生生世世追随烦恼、效正烦恼、自困自惑、自残自害的恶业因缘习气与诸恶誓愿，惭愧忏悔，一代一切众生惭愧忏悔，所有的随生妄想、造作妄语，乃至形成坚固的万事的恶业因缘习气与诸恶誓愿。祈愿眼正善事三宝及一切诸不可思议解脱境界菩萨摄持，素正妙观察智，善能如所如说，观察所有妄想感觉业障，观察它的升起发展消亡的详细现象，念念知道它是那么虚无缥缈，知道它是一切苦的根本，从此不再被它牵引着毫无意义的追随，去造让自己受苦的业。当下即能知情，当下即能做到，不随分别世间业果正生三者相续，三缘淡故，三因不生。心真眼若大多狂性自歇，即证菩提，并愿一切众生同步皆得。感恩上师佛的示子后，祈愿一切众生皆能具足因缘和能力，闻师说法，因机醒悟，恒依佛智，念念觉悟，时时觉悟，时时觉悟，处处觉悟。愿此誓愿等真如具足极大的欢喜信心，大勇猛精进力，不乱专一的念，固定成自己的一部分，生成智慧，巧妙求正生根基。感恩上师佛于此堪忍世界真的慈悲陪伴。但誓愿快速圆满具足临阵的便如风的来信，与我等此恶有情真难行能行能为说法，但惭愧忏悔，亦待一切恶有情正生惭愧忏悔。由于欲尽其诸违顺，尽被爱信而生增极，造整整业，乃至于上师三宝所背信弃义，无惭无愧，无有恭敬，诸障所长，能回生死。水深捞月万万年，生生世世追逐了虚无缥缈，劳民伤财，耗神费力，苦乐无常，颠倒无尽，没意思。感恩上师佛的示子后，祈愿一切众生皆能具足因缘和能力，闻师说法，因机醒悟，恒依佛智，念念觉悟，时时觉悟，时时觉悟，处处觉悟。誓愿今未来给予上师三宝的善因缘，如同真如自性，永恒清净自在，坚固不坏，与诸佛及佛所认可的善知识。善因缘如同真如自性，永恒清净自在，坚固不坏。感恩上师佛的慈悲摄受，感恩所有善因缘没有舍弃我，惭愧忏悔，一代一切众生惭愧忏悔，犯病了还不自知的无名愚痴。祈愿一切众生皆能闻师说法，因机醒悟，但今解释愿具足因缘和能力，速证如所如说，随教而行。于诸和尚阿舍离所，尚能感恩欢喜的恭敬供养增正赞叹，随教而行，处舍乔曼，速速教诲，于正法真生起要想，于和尚阿舍离所生起佛想，于自身所起病人想，于说法者起名因想，为积佛法不爱生命，于诸财物一波之欲起老结想，时事一往法是要，但这个病人坚决是愿感恩欢喜的增益主不要。愿成离垢得法眼净，托念力佛福归元真，发本名药，摩尼宝珠随意显，逍遥自在为法华。愿此誓愿等真如具足极大的欢喜信心，大勇猛精进力，不乱专一的念，固定成自己的一部分，生成智慧，巧妙启发正生根基。每天发完愿以后，这一段因为贴在这里，读在这里，然后我现在我们大家一起再来学习它一下啊，知道六根对六尘的妙处。那我们说到的啊，触不仅仅是身体，那六根我们眼睛去看什么，就是眼睛去触了；耳朵听好听的声音，就耳朵去触了。六根对六尘的妙处，为什么叫妙？因为正神自己认为好，感受好。我听到好听的，我认为好，感受好；我吃到好吃的，认为好，感受好。然后呢，我见到好看的，我认为好，感受好。但从究竟处，从真实处来说，那就是苦，因为你发病，在发病状态中，你认为的什么舒服不舒服，那都是发神经发病，纯粹是你心意识上的东西，也就是你的一个妄想而已，它根本不是什么舒服和好过。 我们认为这时候不舒服了，或者是舒服了，或者是听到好听的话，这时候在那里认为好高兴了，或者是听到挨骂的话、骂人的话，不高兴了。这个高兴、不高兴、舒服、不舒服，都是在发神经、发病。这个感受就是一个妄想而已，根本不是什么舒服和好过。因为这是心意识上的东西，心意识上的东西，你还有一个好受不好受，舒服不舒服，那是心意识上的东西，是一个妄想而已。那就犹如我们去回忆小时候的那个味道，老是在找小时候的味道，吃东西的时候是不是老是在找小时候的味道？说这是我小时候的味道，那在回忆那个食品是怎样怎样的好吃，而那你在想的过程中是不是就是一个妄想而已啊？就是你在找小时候味道，认为它好吃，或者是在意念某个东西的味道，你是不是还是一个妄想呢？就是一个前尘影视而已。你这里在找舒服不舒服，就是你心意识上的东西，就是一个妄想而已呀。所以妙处，所谓的妙处，你听到一个什么东西，见到一个什么东西，然后认为好、不好、舒服、不舒服、高兴、不高兴，发病是在发神经、发病，纯粹是你心意识上的东西，也就是你的个妄想而已。我们现在开始忏悔。愿大家一起唱啊！愿大悲法师三宝大力强力加持，令我等记一切众生尽未来际边界时空处，切记忏悔的作用与威力。忏悔就正如运硫酸水城去浇灌一棵大树，是不可能结果的。即使结果了，也很少了，因为你已经破坏了它的生命力。忏悔相当于用刀砍树，树砍死了，还能结果吗？过去我种了一粒恶种子，我现在天天拿忏悔的开水去烫，这个恶种子再狠，也架不住我拿忏悔的开水烫。我忏悔多了，拿开水烫多了，这个恶种子自然而然就被我烫死了。所以说，有的时候恶业不结恶果，若能如法忏悔者，所有烦恼悉皆除，犹如劫火坏世间，烧尽须弥并居海。忏悔能烧烦恼心，忏悔能往生天路，忏悔能得四禅乐，忏悔于宝摩尼珠，忏悔能言金刚树，忏悔能入禅乐宫，忏悔能出三界狱，忏悔能开菩提花，忏悔见佛大圆镜，忏悔能至于宝所。切记业力可怕，业力不可思议，业力甚大，能敌须弥，能生觉，能战圣道。生死无始，自无穷，烦恼大海深无底，业障尽极如虚名，如影随形不离身，一切实真战胜道，尽占人天妙乐果，远占无上菩提果，在家能找烦恼因，出家易破清净戒。我们现在请身一起忏悔，请诸神随我一起礼佛忏悔，业障消除，消除业障，增长福慧。人理所理性空寂，感应道教郎四爷，我此道场如地珠，唯愿三宝引现真。我身引现三宝前，头面皆足归命礼，唯愿三宝垂加护，能灭一切颠倒心。愿我早悟真性缘，速证如来无上道。大乘大集地藏十轮经卷第8，上业道品第6之一。佛言：善男子，云何名菩萨摩诃萨是人？善男子，此十人者，非于法也，当知即是十善业道，成就如是十者，能故得名菩萨摩诃萨也。于一切恶皆能解脱，一切善法皆能成就，速能盈满大涅槃海。以大善巧方便智观，成熟一切正生之力，皆令获得利益安乐。所以者何？善男子，过去一切诸佛世僧，皆悉远离十恶业道，皆悉称扬赞叹，如是十善业道所得果报。是故若能于此所说十善业道，随所获益，乃至命真，究竟无法，必获 一切殊胜果报。世界众生各随其业，所现不同。如是一切，无不由心，因无明起欲之邪见而生贪爱嗔恨，由贪爱嗔恨而造生育极欲之业。由业受报，或富或贫，或贵或贱，或是或非，或好或坏，苦不堪言。是故修学了达因果，忏悔罪业，除灭恶报，习练善业，招感福报。今忏悔其语。今日道场，同业大正，同业大正，从于无始以至今生，因由无明起欲之邪见，因生贪爱欺与伤害无量众生；由无明起欲之邪见，因生嗔恨欺与伤害无量众生。以此为因为整为根，招感三整决定之事。一者招感智人所厌，与人相近；二者招感慧法连绵，没有实用；三者招感虚妄一生，毫无威德。若生人真得二真果报，一者言无人数，二者语不明了，招感外报，草木凋零，枝条几次。思维至此，毛骨悚然，诸种苦报实难受起。仰仗施佛三宝，无量无边不可思议威神力量，令我罪业消除，正业清除。故于今日归于施佛三宝，发起坚固广大圆满觉悟之心，求哀忏悔。南无皈依具恩根本是佛。南无皈依十方尽虚空界一切诸佛。南无皈依十方尽虚空界一切僧法。南无皈依十方尽虚空界一切僧伽。南无皈依本师释迦牟尼佛。南无皈依药师琉璃光佛。南无皈依阿弥陀佛。南无皈依宝性佛。南无皈依波头摩圣佛。南无皈依狮子吼佛。南无皈依毗婆尸佛。南无皈依宝胜佛，南无皈依宝相佛，南无皈依袈裟长佛，南无皈依大通上王佛，南无皈依未来弥勒真佛，南无皈依文殊师利菩萨，南无皈依普贤菩萨，南无皈依观世音菩萨，南无皈依地藏菩萨。佛说：十善业道经云，若离其语，即得三整决定：一者招感，定为智人所爱；二者招感，定能以智如实答问；三者招感，定于人天威德最胜，无有虚妄。若能回向阿耨多罗三藐三菩提者，后成佛时，即得如来诸所述记，皆不腾捐。是故发愿，当愿众生遍一切时空处，不兴其语伤害一切众生，以利益语言面对一切众生，信不其语，传了四神语、实语、实语、意语、法语、顺道理语、巧条佛语，随时处量决定语，乃至细笑上恒思审，何况故出散乱之言，祈求释佛三宝摄受加倍，早日圆满。哎，这个12页已经忏悔完了，然后后面就是一个会诊了。明天继续，明天继续。那我们今天呢，来学习一下关于胃这一块的一些问题，博个医生的一些视频哈。我们今天一起来先来学习一下。我刚才没有共享声音啊，所以现在把它打一下。
In college. I just wish I would have known back then what I know now, because there is a very simple remedy But ultimately, you have to correct your diet because if you had your diet being corrected, you would never get the ulcer in the first place. So,
深层型
so this might be new information for you. I've had some serious abdominal pain for years, and I searched out everywhere. You know, I used to have really bad ulcers in college. I just wish I would have known back then what I know now, because there is a very simple remedy. But ultimately, you have to correct your diet because if you had your diet being corrected, you would never get the ulcer in the first place. You know, I used to have really bad ulcers in college. I just wish I would have known back then what I know now, because there is a very simple remedy. But ultimately, you have to correct your diet because if you had your diet being corrected, you would never get the ulcer in the first place. So, what is an ulcer? Well, it's not a minor thing, it's a major thing. It's a hole in your stomach or your small intestine where the lining has broken down. Now, there are many theories about what causes an ulcer, from stress, nutritional deficiencies, to a microbe called H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, and of course, the side effects from taking NSAIDs, which are medications. But today I'm going to show you a remedy that can really help you get rid of an ulcer. In college, I had it so bad, I would be waking up in the middle of the night with this gnawing, dull, burning pain in my stomach that would only be relieved if I ate something. And of course, the way I dealt with it was mega amounts of Tums, which is calcium carbonate, like limestone. So I do know what it feels like to have this condition, and it's not very pleasant. Now, the most popular remedy for ulcers would be Prilosec, which is a PPI, a protein pump inhibitor type medication, in which it stops the acid production. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. It does work. It does help people, no doubt. But there's some slight minor complications. These are called side effects, like gas, vomiting, nauseousness, headache, abdominal pain, increased risk of dementia, increased risk of the infection C. diff, increased risk of pneumonia, bone fractures from osteoporosis, and polyps and kidney inflammation. But other than that, it's totally safe. So the question is, are there safer alternatives than these medications? Now, one study, it was an animal study, comparing the medication called omeprazole to cabbage juice. And the study demonstrated that the group that took the cabbage juice for ulcers showed an 83% improvement versus an 81% group with the medication group. So it was only slightly better, but without the side effects. In another study involving the comparison of the medication cimetidine to cabbage, showed that the group that consumed cabbage healed their ulcers in 15 days compared to 28 days in the group that took the medication. So let's talk a little bit about cabbage. What is in this cabbage that helps ulcers? Well, they isolated it down to this vitamin U. Now, vitamin U is not really a vitamin. It's a term used to describe a group of sulfur compounds. Okay, these are plant-based compounds with an S because there's quite a few of them, and they're made from sulfur. So this group of compounds are called glucosinolates. Now, what's very interesting about glucosinolates is that it has a very potent effect to dismantle and destroy H. pylori, one of the most commonly found microorganisms involved with ulcers. So this is probably why cabbage works so well with ulcers. Now, the real question is, why do you have H. pylori? Well, I did a video on this, and in a normal person, H. pylori is not acting in a pathogenic form. And apparently, when your acids go too low and you don't have enough stomach acid, so the pH is going higher, more alkaline, when the stomach should be between 1 and 3, very, very acidic, this microbe tends to overgrow and becomes pathogenic and starts to create ulcers. And so here the person is left with the treatment of getting rid of the acid. That's the very thing that triggered this infection in the first place. And so originally, and this is my own point of view, ulcers were created by a lack of acid, not an excess amount of acid. And then these H. pylori microbes started growing, and then you get the ulcer. So cabbage apparently will put these things either in remission or kill them. Now, there's a couple things you need to know about cabbage. If you cook it too much, you'll destroy this chemical compound. So you can do raw cabbage juice, okay, that will work. And it doesn't matter if the cabbage is green or red, it'll work the same. You can use steamed cabbage because apparently you can retain 97% of this compound if you steam it. Just don't overcook it. So steaming is one way to consume cabbage. Or you can ferment cabbage as sauerkraut. Now, one tiny problem with fermenting cabbage is it does reduce this compound, but you then get all these additional beneficial friendly bacteria when you consume sauerkraut. You get the prebiotics, which is a fiber that feed your microbes. So there's really 4 ways I would recommend consuming cabbage. Just eating it raw in some salad or some dish, fermenting it as sauerkraut, steaming it, or juicing it, which you'd probably get the most concentrated form of this phytonutrient. The next video I think you should watch would be on sauerkraut. There's so many benefits to sauerkraut. I think this would be a really important video. Check it out.
OK，那我们现在看完了这个，那后面还在嘛？肠胃炎溃疡，然后不同的肚子痛和胀气。肠胃消化不良的最大原因，先看一下这个。
So many people are having digestive issues and they're changing their diet and they're doing all these things, they're taking supplements, but it's not really working. And that's probably because there's something else going on that I want to share with you today. It's kind of a hidden source of digestive problems that you need to be aware of. And when I tell you this, it'll make sense. And you maybe already knew it, but it's called stress. Okay. And I'm going to talk about the specific types of stress that influence our digestion the most. But this stress digestive problem link is huge. So I'm going to go through exactly what happens when you go through stress. And this will kind of be mind blowing when you think about it. But if you even look at the autonomic nervous system in relationship to the 2 different systems, well, actually, there's 3. You have the sympathetic flight or fight mechanism, and then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also called rest and digest. Most of the healthy digestion occurs in a parasympathetic, low stress state. But you also have another part of the autonomic nervous system, the system that works on automatic, called the enteric nervous system. And that's another system that's directly embedded into your digestive system, and that links right up to this thing called the vagus nerve that goes up to the brain. And this is why whatever's going on down here is going to affect up here. But it's a 2-way street. Whatever's going on up here, as in stress, can go down here as well. And that is what we're going to be focusing on today. When we talk about digestion, if we take a look at the foundational part of digestion, it's a cell. And it's a single layer cell in your small intestine and the large that's called the enterocyte. Okay. Now, in the colon, it's usually referred to as the colonocyte, but basically it's a little cell that absorbs things, minerals, trace minerals, vitamins, amino acids, and longer amino acids called peptides, and lipids, which are fats, and B12, and even bile. So these cells are constantly absorbing these nutrients, okay? And of course, they're broken down from the acid in the stomach, the enzymes in the stomach, and a lot of the enzymes within the small intestine, as well as the pancreas as well the bile does help break down the fat to a certain level, so then the enzyme can break it down even more. But at some point, it needs to be absorbed into these little cells. One interesting thing about these cells, or this layer of cells, is the surface area is massive. The body's very smart, and strategically, the way that it increases surface area is by kind of having these folds. Okay, like if you took an accordion or like a slinky, for example, and you stretch it out, it would be a lot longer, right? Well, same thing with the intestines. You have these little villi, which are little um, pouches that kind of come up and down like this. So basically, it can actually increase the surface area, but within each villi or little um, pouch, you have these tiny little cells and then hairs, which are like kind of a micro version of these villi extending from that little cell. So if you were to stretch all that out, you're going to get a tremendous amount of surface area to do the job of absorption. Now, these colonocytes or these enterocytes aren't the only cells. There's other cells. I don't want to get into that, but some cells that produce mucus, a mucus layer as a protection uh, between like pathogens and microbes, and then the actual surface area as well. So that's just a side note. All right, so now let's talk about the consequence of stress in your digestive tract. Well, number one, there's a conversion of the bacteria to something called biofilms, which are these colonies of microbes that band together and they start to develop either a slime or even a calcium little protective mechanism so they can go underneath the radar with your immune system. And because a lot of these guys are pathogenic and they create a lot of problems, but you're going to get more biofilms developing when you have more stress. That's their survival mechanism. Number two, you get an erosion of the mucosal layer. Now, if it keeps eroding more and more and more, you end up eventually get an ulcer. And maybe you've heard the link between H. pylori and ulcers, and that's because of the microbial infection. You see, the H. pylori is normally in your stomach, hanging out, not creating any problem, okay? But when you stress it, it comes out of remission and it starts to hammer you and create immune reactions. And they don't know exactly why that mucosal layer becomes destroyed, but it does. And then you start getting an ulcer. And so the way they treat it is with antibiotics. That gives you a bunch of other problems. I'm going to recommend a much safer remedy, sulforaphane, which is in broccoli sprouts, or it's in cabbage and radish, or zinc carnosine. Zinc carnosine helps you reestablish this mucosal layer in your stomach, in the top part of the intestine, and even the large colon. And another thing it can do is potently inhibit H. pylori. And it's a really good anti-inflammatory. And apparently, stress inhibits this zinc. Okay, but zinc carnosine is the best to take for an ulcer or for gastritis or for an eroding mucosal layer. These microbes are very strategic and very smart and sneaky because H. pylori produces this enzyme to make more urea, which then turns into ammonia. And the pH of ammonia is really super high. It's very, very alkaline. And that's how it counters the acid in your stomach to survive. So if you can understand that and keep your stomach strongly acidic, you can kind of keep this H. pylori at bay. But it can start doing more damage in an alkaline environment. Just remember that. So with stress, you get more biofilms, you get this erosion of the mucosal layer, you get decreased transit time of food particles going through the digestive tract. This is called constipation. I mean, even think about this. When you go through stress, what do you feel? You feel like a knot in your stomach, maybe nauseous, because it locks everything up. It takes a very relaxed state to be able to digest and have things travel through nicely. The actual bacteria during a stress state start to feed off these enterocytes, and it can start to break them down to the point where you start getting leaky gut, which now there's spaces or an increased permeability. And this is not good because food particles and proteins and all sorts of things can then travel through, and they don't go through the normal immigration. And this creates an immune reaction because your body now senses even good things as bad things, potentially incorrectly identifying them as pathogens, and now you have antibodies against maybe some good things, your own tissues, foods that are good for you, and now you're allergic to those as well. So allergies and autoimmune diseases really stem from this leaky gut situation. You get an alteration of the ratios of bad to good. You get more bad pathogenic microbes versus good. You also get a decreased diversity of microbes. You get decrease of total microbes. So the relationship of these microbes starts to change when the environment is stressful. Of course, this is going to lead to inflammation. So these are all the different things that can happen. I recently did a video on stress relating to damage to the heart muscle, right? Because adrenaline causes hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. Well, now we're talking about how stress affects the digestive system directly. Now, let's touch on the type of stress that creates these problems. Probably the biggest thing is emotional stress. This can happen after a loss of a loved one, a loss of a job, loss of money, loss of anything, or an ongoing emotional stress that you're stuck in and can't get out of it. That's the worst type of stress. It could be related to the environment, the world, relationships, anything. It has a profound effect over your digestion. And anything you can do to improve that would be very beneficial to your gut issues. And I have a ton of videos on how to cope with stress, nose breathing, controlling your breath, especially when you're sleeping, going for long walks. There are so many things you can do exercise wise. There's just many things. Now, another big stress for these microbes and your lining of your colon and your small intestine is antibiotics, okay? And also things that act like an antibiotic, like chlorine in tap water, artificial sweeteners, GMO foods that have glyphosate. Glyphosate is an herbicide that is classified as an antibiotic. And then you also have all the foods that are sterilized, okay, pasteurized milk products, pasteurized juice, pasteurization, canned foods, box foods, preservatives, processed foods. But the more the food is cooked, the more it's dead. It lacks enzymes, but more importantly, it lacks microbes, okay? Good microbes. And they do this to increase shelf life. And that comes with the package. You're creating an encouragement of sterilization of your own microbiome. Anytime you take an antibiotic, you better at the same time start taking a probiotic. But there's some other interesting stresses that I want to talk about that directly relate to your digestive system. And one being intravenous feeding. When you're in ICU, in the hospital, or for other situations, you have to be fed through an IV. Boy, does it create a lot of problems with your digestive system. And your liver, a fatty liver, liver disease, increased risk of infections, blood clots, severe deficiencies of all sorts of things. And I'm just bringing that up because if you have to take this or you know someone taking this, um, you might want to look for a more quality type of intravenous food because what they use for the calories is they use soybean oil. Wow, you're going to inject someone with soybean oil, and that's very, very high in omega-6. It creates a lot of problems in the liver, like I said, a fatty liver, and there's a lot of research to back that up. If it creates that many problems injected, what is it doing in our diet, right? It creates some other issues. It's not a safe product. And also in this intravenous feeding, they put glucose, synthetic vitamins, minerals that are probably not in the right form, not good. Now, I mentioned ICU, right? Um, critical care. This creates a lot of digestive problems because when someone's in that state of critical care, a lot of times they're fed their nutrition through an IV, which I already mentioned all the problems with that. But they a lot of times put someone on a PPI, an antacid type medication, which creates more stress within the digestive system itself. And then they put you on an antibiotic, right? So you're just putting massive stress on these microbes at the worst time, a critical care situation. And sometimes they feed you epinephrine and they have to, but you have to realize what that's doing to your gut flora. It's creating hypoxia, okay? It's creating more stress. Because what is epinephrine? That's a stress hormone. You inject it right in the person. Now, sometimes you have to, but boy, you better be doing something to kind of counter some of the bad effects. And then let's say they use opiates, right? Opiates really shut down your GI system. So now we have all these pathogens that are stuck there. You have constipation as a side effect. And I even know when you have like anesthetics, they put you out. A lot of people wake up and they can't urinate, they can't eliminate. There's just so many problems with surgeries and ICU that I think more attention needs to put on this critical time where you're in the hospital, and it's just amazing how anyone survives that. And just as a side note, when you take antacids or anything that addresses the pH of your stomach, whether it's PPIs or other types of medication, and you start raising the pH of that stomach above 3.8, okay, normally it should be between 1 and 3. When it goes above 3.8, you start getting overgrowth of bacteria in the wrong place in your small intestine. And so now every time you eat fiber, guess what? You have microbes in the wrong place. That's going to start to ferment in your small intestine and create a lot of bloating. So I'm just bringing this up because the solution of fixing one problem ends up giving you another problem. So the question is now, what can we do about it? Number one, do whatever you can to reduce the stress. And I put some links down below of things to help you cope with stress, in addition to eliminating the source of the stress, right? Okay, number two, L-glutamine is really beneficial to heal an inflamed gut as well as a leaky gut. L-glutamine, that's a really good remedy. All right, number three, probiotics and fermented foods, as in kefir, if you don't have a dairy problem, like in some allergy or lactate intolerance problem. Sauerkraut is really awesome. But here's the thing. If you have sauerkraut or kimchi or some type of fermented vegetables, like pickles, for example, and you have more bloating from that, then you're going to have to do the carnivore diet for a while, because that's one way to address severe inflammatory problems in the bowel, as well as SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where you have a lot of bloating. Because every time you have fiber, it feeds the microbes, and these microbes are in the wrong place. Now, if you haven't seen another really good video on digestion, you should check this out, which gives you a lot of the remedies that are not necessarily related to stress, but other things. And I put that up right here. Check it out. Do you experience bloating? I know I did for many, many years. It was very, very uncomfortable. It seemed like almost everything I ate, I felt like I was pregnant, and it was very difficult to sleep. It was difficult to constantly suck in my stomach to try to avoid anyone knowing that I was actually bloated. So this is what you need to know about bloating. There are many different causes of bloating, okay? There's not just one cause. So I'm going to go through all the causes, but there's a real simple thing you can do to identify where it's coming from, okay? Number one, take a look at when you started getting bloating, okay? Was it yesterday? Was it today? What time did you start getting bloating? And then what did you eat right before? Was it the obvious junk food or processed food? Was it sugar alcohols? Let's say you started the ketogenic diet and you had some, I don't know, xylitol, erythritol, or mannitol, whatever, and then that created the bloating because that was new, okay? Or you saw in one of my videos that I recommended consuming 7 to 10 cups of salad, and now you're bloating, okay? Or was it that cruciferous vegetable that you normally don't consume, and then you start getting bloated? Or maybe it was dairy, okay? That's a common cause of bloating. Or you bought a keto snack or a keto bar that had corn fiber, for example, which was a new ingredient that you added to your diet, and now you're pregnant. Well, guess what? All you need to do is just avoid that thing, and you're not going to bloat anymore. Or like in practice, I had this one lady who came in and she says, I'm bloating like I'm pregnant. And then she came in the following day and guess what? She was pregnant. So your bloating could be that you're pregnant. But very simply, just find out when you like this, you simply could massage the two key parts of your digestive system that are many times responsible for bloating. One is the gallbladder on the right side, or it could be the pancreas, which I'm going to talk about. So what you're going to do is you just kind of start massaging right underneath the rib cage, okay? And I like to just press about an inch off the midline to the right and about an inch down from your rib cage, maybe 2 inches down, and press right into that area and just kind of massage to the left and the right and just kind of hold this point for about 1 to 2 minutes. Just don't use a sharp object when you're pressing in here. You can use a massage tool or the end of some dull piece of wood, but don't use a sharp object, okay? And then you just kind of work on the left side and you start massaging these two areas, and you're gonna help kind of decongest these organs and get rid of a lot of bloating. And it'll either push gas through or fluid. Now, one side note I want to mention, one of my patients noticed that their constant bloating went away when they went down to Florida and laid on the beach, okay? And that was because this person was going through a massive stress, and every time they experienced sun and a reduction of cortisol stress, their stomach reduced to the point where it was flat. And that is because cortisol or stress creates inflammation and swelling in the midsection. Okay, so that's just a side note. If you notice that you go through a stress event and you notice your stomach is distended, especially as the day goes on. But let's go through each organ and talk about the potential cause of your bloating. Let's start with the stomach here. If the stomach does not have enough acid, or the pH of the stomach is too alkaline, okay, because you're taking antacids or whatever, you can experience either acid reflux, okay, or GERD, or heartburn, or indigestion. Indigestion is a real good clue that you don't have enough acid in your stomach, or bloating, okay? So if you have bloating and you have indigestion or acid reflux, then it's more likely that it's coming from the stomach. The thing about the stomach is it's one of the first places to help you start to digest, okay? And if you don't have enough acid, like a lot of people, from that point on, the food stuff will kind of go through this whole chain of events. And if it's undigested here, it's going to be undigested here, and these organs are going to have to work harder. So it's very important to have enough acid in your stomach to start the process of breaking down the protein, especially with the right amount of acid, okay? So if you need acid, what you can do is take something called betaine hydrochloride. It comes in a supplement, and you would take maybe 5 or 6 of these with a meal, and that's going to greatly help the stomach regain its acid. The other thing you could take is apple cider vinegar, either on an empty stomach or with food. So you would take 1 or 2 tablespoons in some water, and that will help your digestion, okay? So that would be the stomach. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the gallbladder. The purpose of the gallbladder is to concentrate bile, which is like a detergent that helps you break down fat, by a factor of 5x. So it helps to concentrate the bile, so when you eat, it's released into the small intestine, and it mixes with the pancreatic enzymes to help you break down certain things, okay? Now, if the gallbladder does not have enough bile, maybe you don't have a gallbladder, or maybe it's just sluggish, you'll get burping, belching, or bloating, or you'll feel nauseated. And there's a lot of symptoms, but you can feel bloating if you don't have enough bile salts, okay? So if you bloat and you have this belching and burping, and maybe you have a full sensation underneath the right rib cage, or you have pain that's going into the right shoulder, right through here, it could be up back through here, it could be up here, or in your neck, then suspect gallbladder, and then you need some purified bile salts or gallbladder formula to help assist this gallbladder. So that would be some clues that it could be that you need help right through in here. The other thing you can do, and you can use this also to help figure out if it is the gallbladder, is just press underneath the right rib cage. You start massaging underneath the right rib cage, and if your discomfort on the right side goes away, or you feel less bloating, chances are it could be that you just need a little help with more bile salts. All right, now we have the pancreas, right? Pancreas is more on the left side, but it does cross over a little bit to the center, maybe to the right side. But if your pancreas needs help, let's say you don't have enough enzymes, okay, because of various reasons, maybe you're diabetic or you've eaten a lot of carbs in the past and you're getting a loss of function in the pancreas. The pancreas just makes enzymes. You could get diarrhea. You can get floating stool, kind of like a greasy stool that floats. That means you don't have enough enzymes to break down that fat. It's called lipase. And guess what? You're going to get a lot of bloating. If this is the case, okay, you need more enzymes. So you'd want to get some supplement that has a wide variety of enzymes. You also want to make sure that you consume food with enzymes, maybe some raw, like salads, okay, to get more enzymes to help you digest, as well as fermented food like sauerkraut, things like that would help take the pressure off the pancreas. The pancreas also improves when you cut down the high carbs, okay, because the more sugar you have, the more insulin that's produced, the more the pancreas has to work harder. So that's the pancreas, okay? So with the stomach, you would need more acid. With the gallbladder, bile. With the pancreas, enzymes. Moving right along, we have this thing called the small intestine, which is right in the center. The small intestine is where you have 90% of all the digestion, okay? And so the food particles that are broken down by the stomach into amino acids, the gallbladder breaking down the fat, the pancreas helping breaking down food, and then the small intestine, which also has enzymes, but it's not supposed to have a lot of bacteria. A lot of the bacteria, the good bacteria, should be in this large intestine, okay, further down. But you have this long pipe that the food should go through, and the enzymes and other things should act on the food to break it down and then help it be absorbed so it can go in through the liver and other places in the body. But a lot of people get bloating in the small intestine, okay? They actually have fermentation going on in the small intestine. Fermentation is the action of a microbe on a food, like a carbohydrate, a fiber, or sugar, okay? Now, an example of this would be with my chickens, okay? So I have about 16 chickens, and we eat their eggs. And what I do is I ferment the food, okay? When you ferment the food, you actually soak it in water for 3 days, and the bacteria that's normally in the grains, and which, by the way, they're organic grains, is going to act on the carbohydrate, break them down, and make it much easier for the chicken to digest that food. Plus, in the fermentation process, you get a lot of gases that are released, like carbon dioxide. As you can see in this image right here, we have a lot of carbon dioxide and other gases being produced by the microorganisms. It looks like it's boiling, but it's just releasing gas. But guess what? When you have this excess fermentation going on in your small intestine, that gas is going to produce a lot of distension and bloating. So you could have either fluid retention, okay, going on in the small intestine, or gas. Because if you're not able to digest certain foods in the small intestine, you're going to retain fluid. And that's one version of bloating, but it can also be a combination of gas as well. So this condition in the small intestine is called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, okay? This is a situation where you have bacteria that normally should be in the large intestine, but it's in the small intestine. It's in the wrong place. And the food coming down is being fermented in the wrong place. And you're going to get a lot of gas and fluid retention. And how do we know you have SIBO? Well, if you consume probiotics, guess what? You're going to feel worse. You're going to get more bloating. Or if you consume more salad or fiber, it's going to be worse. You're going to get more bloating. Why? Because you have these bacteria that are ready to ferment it at this level, and you're going to feel worse if you consume that. So that's one indication to know that potentially you have SIBO. You can go get a test. So what do you do if you have SIBO? Well, you want to avoid probiotics and you want to avoid fiber. So you probably want to do carnivore for a while, which means you're not going to be consuming any plant fiber, okay, any vegetables for a while, maybe 1 or 2 months to reset your system. The other thing you should take is oregano and garlic to act as a natural antibiotic. You can also do clove and thyme and even sage, things like that, and that will act as a natural antibiotic, but these two work really good. Another really important thing to do would be fasting, intermittent fasting. Fast as long as you can. That will help to reset and clean this out. Okay, so that's the small intestine. All right, now we're at the large intestine. You can also have excessive amounts of fermentation going on, giving you bloating and gas. If you have this situation, it could be you just have an imbalance in microbes and you have the wrong amount of certain microbes versus the other, in which case a wide range of vegetables might be helpful, more fiber. A lot of people that I know that have problems down here have rarely have any vegetables. In fact, the average person consumes, I think, 1.5 cups of vegetables every single day. It's just not enough. So the microbes live on the fiber, but if you're not feeding them on a regular basis, they might not grow to the amount that you want or to the diversity that you need. So a probiotic and fiber would be beneficial for this situation. So if you feel better when you take a probiotic or fiber, or a combination like sauerkraut has good bacteria and fiber, if you feel better when you take that, chances are your problem is in the large intestine. If you feel worse when you consume sauerkraut, chances are you might have a problem in the small intestine. Okay, so that's just a way to differentiate those two. But anyway, I wanted to go through the whole system to help you understand the different parts of this digestive system and the potential cause of your bloating so you can fully eliminate it. Now, the other thing I want to mention, if you're not on healthy keto and you're not doing intermittent fasting, I would first go for that. Implement that before you even get into any of these things, because you just might need to have the correct eating plan and the correct time of eating to correct the whole thing. So if you want that information, I put a very simple playlist. You can learn this very quickly right here. Check it out.
我们还有几分钟，是再看一个呢，还是我们分析一下我们这段时间说到的胃里面？你看前面说到，他说
Today we're going to talk about how to
前面我看到我们在看到第一个的时候，他说那个溃疡呢，不要小看溃疡，那就是胃穿孔跟那个小肠穿孔呢，那个小洞呢，看到吗？开始第一个视频的时候，那其实上真的是很危险的，很严重的。然后呢，那制止它这个的最好的一个自然疗法就是包菜汁啊，它叫高丽菜，就是那个包菜汁。然后这里再说到，就是那个刚才再说到了哈，这个小肠在小肠里面消化，那如果是说里面胀气了，他说很多的细菌不应该留在小肠里面，小肠只是负责吸收的呀，然后吸收完以后就渗入大肠。那如果是说小肠里面那些细菌过分滋生的时候，那不应该是它停的地方了，那我们那就会胀气了。然后一胀气以后，这个时候你再吃了益生菌，或者是吃益生菌或者是纤维，这时候是对它没有帮助的，只能更胀。我们有的时候说肚子胀了或者是不排便啊什么的，就猛吃那种纤维啊，或者是说吃益生菌。益生菌就是说现在的酸奶为什么卖的那么好，人家就是要那个益生菌嘛。但这个时候你也搞清楚是哪里胀气。是要搞清楚是在胃里面还是小肠里面，还是应该在大肠里面，它在不同的位置，那就应该采取用不同的那个对治方法。那如果是在胃里面，我们在讲到胃里面胀气的话，其实是胃酸不够啊。刚才也说到胃酸不够，胃酸不够的时候，你就增加。最简单的就是吃苹果醋了。我讲的最简单就是苹果醋帮助消化。然后呢，那个胆囊呢，它是浓缩的，去帮助消化分解食物的。然后 那你看哈，每一个器官真的每一个器官里面，它都发生。我们如果是要同时讲，只是说讲胀气，还有就是说大便不通了、便秘了，然后到底要吃什么呢？真的每个人不一样的。现在就说，就像我们现在有些人说出口工作不好啊，排便不顺畅了、便秘了，那有些人吃那个香蕉。有些人吃这个，有些人吃那个，每个人真的每个人不一样。然后那就是这里就说到了，真的在不同的器官里面啊，到底是在小肠里面，还是大肠里面，还是在胃里面？如果是大肠里面的话，它那里是要细菌，可能你增加纤维，它就很快出去了。但是在小肠里面就不行了，在小肠里面它不应该是在那里发酵的地方呢，它就更加的胀气了。这时候就不能再吃那种纤维跟吃益生菌进去了，所以我们自己真的是要搞清楚了。还有就是比如说胆汁不足，胆汁不足的时候，那就是在右边了，右边真心线，我们真心线，然后那个肋骨往右一指宽的位置吧，那个地方你去按一按，它是不是痛的、胀的？然后如果是说胆汁不足的时候，那我们分解食物就拉长了嘛，就这样。然后他这里说到过，你判断是不是胆汁不足的时候，那右边这个肋骨下方那里如果胀痛的话，它会牵着整个右边的那个肩胛骨那边啊，右边的手啊，肩胛骨啊，特别是后背那个肩胛骨那个地方会有个痛点。这些的话都是几个我们去找定位点，就是要判断自己判断。所以这个其实真的是也挺有趣的哈。然后这个胰脏是在左边的，胰脏然后呢这边是胆囊，左右两边，然后这些刚才包括医生都在讲到，就是说当我们出现一些疼痛的时候，你自己可以先在这两边找找，那你是不是胀痛？那你自己按摩，就是用你自己手指不够的话，你要用比较大一点的、粗一点的，或者是你如果是你的手不够力的话，你至少根棍子什么不能用尖尖的，你去轻轻的按一按它，点按了哈。当然，这个轻的话你不能太轻了，就是说要有按到你自己有效果，或者也不能太重了。然后这些他真的他给的那个方法非常的好啊，没有副作用一个是按那些点呢，真的是关窍点了；另外一个就是食物很精准的哪些食物能吃，哪些食物这个时候坚决不能吃，很精准的。那比如说刚才说到的那个说，一旦真的是在小肠里面腹胀的时候，你这时候不能吃益生菌，更不能吃纤维了，你越吃越堵啊。是不是我们有的时候这个碰到这种情况，也就是在自己身上找感觉，自己身上找感觉。有的时候如果是腹胀了，嗯，满满胀胀的，感觉肚子里面满满胀胀的，然后说消化不好，也没时候不想吃了，因为肚子满满的嘛。然后这时候说，哎，多吃蔬菜，多吃蔬菜，吃蔬菜以后等一下很快就排了，但是怎么还堵着呢？然后真的是在不同的部位啊。如果是在小肠那里，这时候在吃的时候，它那里不更堵吗？更加的胀。关于那个胃穿孔那一个哈，因为师傅那天也特意交代过，他就说胃穿孔这个大家一定要清楚啊。那如果是说胃穿孔里面胃穿孔啊，然后那些胃酸通过那个孔啊跑到我们的腹腔里面去的时候，我们的其他的器官呢经不起胃酸的是。经不起胃酸的那样子的那个洗脑。那我们先不讲吃不吃这东西，这个量就一定要控制了，就是饮食有节，因为在胃上面的疾病，好多第一个原因都是饮食不节，这个没有节制，这个没有节制，一个是偏食，是不是说一个是偏食，就是 爱吃某个东西就只吃某个东西，然后这样子一偏食以后，就会对某个器官造成特别的伤害。那另外一个就是量，没有量，我们讲质跟量，量没有节制，所以饮食不节。那胃的疾病，我们排一大串下来，都是排在第一，都是饮食不节造成的。然后那就他那么一下，然后就造成一堆的问题，够去解决的，够痛苦的。今天时间到了，感恩大家的陪伴，我们明天继续。今天时间到。